Hi everyone, this is Peter Sco for Music is a Journey. Welcome back to another episode of, well, I'm not really numbering them anymore. I've given up on that. Anyway, welcome back to another video. So, I'm sitting here with this box on my lap. This is a box for holding CDs because I don't have one of those big, gorgeous, wall-to-wall CD racks like you see some people have. I have only what you see behind me and then lots and lots of plastic boxes. Anyway, on my desk here, there are rows and rows of CDs that need a home. And I thought I'd start with this one box here. And I did some reorganizing of the shelves. I used to have all my 60s CDs over here, plus some other stuff. And now they're on the table behind me. So I'm going to put them in this box. I'm going to put this on the floor. But anyway, before I start packing them all away, I thought since I have them out, why not talk a little bit about some of my favorite albums from the 1960s? So I'm going to go over a stack of, I don't know, about a dozen albums or so, and then I'm going to mention some additional stuff, which is mostly compilations, but something that I think is worth mentioning. So let's get started. Actually, I'm just going to make a point. This is what I had sorted as kind of miscellaneous 60s stuff mostly, or basically music that's from 65, 66, 67, and maybe 68, alright? Other things like Led Zeppelin or Deep Purple, Pink Floyd, they're put away in other boxes. So there's going to be some groups that are familiar to you probably, and maybe some that aren't going to be familiar to you. So the first one up here, this is the Jimi Hendrix Experience. Yeah. Alright, the first one, Are You Experienced? Here with the, I guess the English album cover. I had the cassette back in the 80s, the one with the kind of yellow background and a circle. Sorry, small feline interruption there. Yeah, no, I had the cassette back in the 80s, which I guess was the North American release, and that was the album that I was used to hearing with the order of the songs in that particular order. Hi! Jeez. Anyway, this one here, it has, what is it, like 17 tracks on it. So it means everything from the cassette that I had, plus lots of additional stuff. So it's cool to have all these extra songs. Some of these were on the original British release. I think some of these might have been B-sides. I don't remember the story behind the whole thing. It has, anyway, lots of extra songs that I'm not familiar with. However, because I'm so familiar with the cassette that I had back in the 80s, I feel that I'm a bit lost here because like the opening track is Foxy Lady. The opening track on the cassette I had was Purple Haze. Manic Depression does come in second, but the track number 2, but then Red House. I don't know Red House. It's coming in here on track number 3. So, yeah, in a way, it's all the songs that I used to love back in the 80s, plus some extra ones, but the order is all mixed around, so I'm a bit confused. I see the cat is now examining my computer chair. Then there's this one here. This is the Amboy Dukes, where it's got a little arrow that says the American Amboy Dukes, which tells me that this is probably the British cover. The American cover, they didn't need to put American in because in Britain, anyway, there was a band already called the Amboy Dukes as well. So this is the second album, Journey to the Center of the Mind. And of course, the Amboy Dukes is where Ted Nugent started out. Basically, what this band formed, I don't know, 66 or something. Their first album was 67. This is 68. And they continued on as the Amboy Dukes. And then Ted Nugent and the Amboy Dukes until finally Ted Nugent went solo in 75. Anyway, I like this one here because there are 2 or 3 tracks on here that actually get pretty intense and heavy. And I think one of them here was... Well, it says here on the back, it says Surrender to Your Kinks, but I think that's a typo because in the song they say Kings. But anyway, that's a really good intense rocker. Journey to the Center of the Mind has some cool psychedelic guitar parts. And there was one other track on here. This is the one. Why is a carrot more orange than an orange? I guess we decided that. Anyway, there was one other really heavy track on here too, but I can't remember what it is now. But anyway, kind of a cool album. Again, it's one I haven't listened to so much recently. I bought it because of the 2 heavy tracks, and I've probably listened to the whole thing through a couple of times. But anyway, it's maybe one of my more liked Amboy Duke's albums out of the ones I've heard. Okay, so here's another one I had on cassette back in the 80s. This is Traffic, Mr. Fantasy. I think this was Traffic's, wasn't it their second album? 1967, I guess, yeah. Of course, I heard Mr. Fantasy on the radio, and back in the late 80s, I was getting interested more in the music of the late 60s and early 70s, so when I heard that one, I thought, hey, that sounds pretty cool, I want to check it out. And yeah, sure, love the title track. Also, I remember liking Berkshire Poppies, because it's kind of humorous. House for Everyone. Now, this one was the House of Truth, and what I like about it was, he looked in one house, it had like, I think it was the House of Lies, and it had like flowers all around the outside, but looking in, it was crumbling inside. The House of Truth stood out plain, but stood out very strong. So I thought that was kind of neat, like the House of Lies, it looks all pretty on the outside, but it's crumbling inside, but the House of Truth is plain and strong. So I like that. There was also the Dealer, it's just called Dealer on here. I love the opening line. I like the song as well, but I love the opening's line. As the evening sun goes down, the dealer shuffles into town. And I think that's just so cool because it's like shuffling, walking, but also he's a dealer. If he's a card dealer, he'll shuffle the cards. So I thought that was just really neat, that like those lyrics. And I don't remember so much else about it. But again, it's one of those albums. I listened to it a fair bit in the 80s on a cassette, so it was one I did have to get on CD. And after getting it on CD, I listened to it once and went, yeah, great. And then need to listen to it again. Alright, and another one. Now this one was actually introduced to me by a neighbor across the street. One day I was blasting Sword, which is a heavy metal band from Quebec. I think the singer is from Quebec, but the band is from Ontario, or they're all from Quebec. I don't know. I was blasting the music on the front step, and he kind of got angry about that. But later on, he asked me if I'd be interested in borrowing some of his records, and he let me listen to, let's see, there was the Outlaws, and I don't remember some other ones, but there was two Janis Joplin ones. One was Got Them Old Cosmic Blues Again, which I also have back here. Some really cool songs on that. And Cheap Thrills, Big Brother and the Holding Company, which is some studio tracks, some live tracks, I think it was. And yeah, I really love this because this is one of those San Francisco psychedelic type albums. And I just love some of the guitar sound. I liked Ball and Chain was really cool. A combination of the two. I Need a Man to Love. Summertime I liked. Here's Piece of My Heart on here. Oh Sweet Mary also. Yeah, but Ball and Chain. And there's some 4 bonus tracks on here as well. Yeah, I think this was always... I also had Pearl on cassette too back in the day, back in the 80s. I think this was my favorite Janis Joplin one. But Got Them Old Cosmic Blues Again also has some pretty cool stuff on there. Alright, then, 10 years after, I read about them in Metallian magazine, Roots of Metal, 10 years after Alvin Lee and his speedy guitar playing. So I picked up Undead and I thought, it's not really all that heavy, is it? And I think the next one I got was this one. Shh. And this one has remained my favorite 10 years after album. The opening track, Bad Scene, I just love the guitar in that one because it's just these buzzing, I don't know, it might just be a single string, but it's just like this, right? But the rest of the band is just going along and the piano's going and the drums and the bass are going. And then it's just this ripping guitar solo in there. I loved it. Two-Time Mama was not bad. Stone Woman, pretty cool. Good Morning Little Schoolgirl, very different from the Yardbirds one. If You Should Love Me is one of those 10 years after ones that starts off a bit slow but gradually builds into a rollicking bluesy type rocker. I Don't Know That You Don't Know My Name, one of the more softer ones, but kind of cool. The Stomp, kind of bluesy, kind of get down type one. And then I Woke Up This Morning, which is 10 years after being a really hard, heavy blues band for was it 68 or 69? I forget now. They had their debut, which I had on CD way back when, but I only liked one track. And I had their second album, was it Speed Kills? I had it on vinyl back in the day too. I don't know what I ever did with all my old vinyl records. I only have a few of them left now. But anyway, Shh was my favorite one and still remains my favorite 10 years after album. Here's one I just picked up last year when I was doing my Canadian music of the 60s video, and I thought I should get this one, but I held off a bit, and then I finally got it. This is the Poppers, their first album, Magic People from 1967. Actually, it's pretty cool. There are some kind of typical type 67 songs, but then there's some of these more psychedelic ones, and you know, some pretty cool experimental guitar and guitar effects. The drumming on here, what's his name, Skip Prokop, yeah, he really has some incredible drumming going on, even back in 67, you know. And later on, when the Poppers folded, Skip Prokop would go on and start off Lighthouse, you know, with like 12 other guys. But anyway, the Poppers, Magic People, I think this is has some pretty nifty psychedelic songs on it. Okay, so I had Jefferson Airplane's Surrealistic Pillow on cassette in the 80s, and there wasn't really much else available on cassette back in the day. So once I started buying CDs, got a few more Jefferson Airplane, and this one has turned out to be my favorite after Bathing at Baxter's, the one that came after Surrealistic Pillow. This is just such a trip. I just love this. Like, there's so many cool songs on here, and actually they've got them like in parts. So like the first one is called Street Mass, and then includes The Ballad of You and Me and Punil, A Small Package of Value Will Come to You Shortly, and Young Girl Sunday Blues. So 3 separate tracks put together in one track. And then there was The War Is Over, Martha, and Wild Time. Really love those. Wild Time has got some pretty good rockin', hard-hitting guitar. Hymn to an Older Generation, The Last Wall of the Castle, Rejoice, which actually is one of my favorite songs as well. Yeah, and the only one I didn't really like was the Spare Change, because it's like 10 minutes and 31 seconds, is it? No, that's when it was 9 minutes and 10 seconds, and it's a lot of, I guess you have to be in the right mood to listen to it, but it's a lot of guitars and bass and kind of doing things and playing off each other, and it sounds like the kind of thing that might show up on a King Crimson album. But anyway, yeah, and then Won't You Try the Saturday afternoon. Yeah, overall, I think, except for Spare Change, I really like pretty much every track on this album. And it's just, you know, remained my favorite Jefferson Airplane album. So this might be a bit of a curious choice. I think most people will go with In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida for Iron Butterfly, but of their 60s output, this one actually has become my favorite. I first got it on vinyl, again in the 80s, used, but later on, of course, got on CD. And I just find that there's, I feel there's more creativity on this album than the previous two. And In the Time of Our Lives has one of the coolest, heavy introductions of Iron Butterfly's catalog. Soul Experience has got this nice groove to it. Lonely Boy is just such a weird one, but I used to love trying to sing that. I'm such a lonely boy when I'm not in your house. Like that. I think that's the longest I've ever sang on a video. Real Fright is cool. In the Crowds has got this kind of frantic feel to it. It Must Be Love has got some great cool. It just gets like, the guitar just gets more fuzzier and fuzzier and just grittier as the song goes on. Her favorite style, I actually quite like that one. Filled with Fear, that's the kind of more intense one. Maybe Into Crowds is the only one I never really got into. And Belle the Beast is Eric Braun's like almost 6-minute long bit. Yeah, there you go. Just listing off all the tracks on here, I'm reminded once again why I like this one better than In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida or Heavy. Although Heavy does have probably my favorite Iron Butterfly track, the Iron Butterfly theme. Gives me chills. Anyway, Iron Butterfly Ball. And then this is kind of an odd one, I think. This is a band called The Litter. They were a garage rock band out of, I forget, somewhere in the... Is it near Detroit or somewhere around there? Possibly. Or was it Cleveland? I forget. Anyway, they released 2 albums. Distortions, and I forget what the second one was. And it's kind of, you know, fuzz tone garage rock, a bit of, you know, British blues rock and inspired and in places, a psychedelic more on the next one, which I don't have, but I just heard on YouTube. And then the singer left, and they got a new singer. He's got a more deeper, lower tone. And this album, Emerge, their third and last album, is it's pretty cool. It's almost proto-punk in some places, proto-metal. There's one track, Blue Ice. Absolutely love that one. It's got this chugging riff to it, and it's really powerful. But again, it's got that kind of, 60s psychedelic sound to it. So it's kind of like proto-metal, proto-punk with the lots of psychedelic feel to it, and then these lower type voices, vocals. Yeah, so The Litter, Emerge. This is a pretty cool one. I think, though, there is one track on here with one of those like super long drum solos, so that's the one minus point. Everybody was doing like 5-10 minute long drum solos there between 69 and 72. Okay, here's one some people probably know about. This is Gun, and one of the interesting things is I think this is the first time Roger Dean did an album cover for a band. I think this may be his first album cover, if I'm not mistaken. So Gun is a power trio, and they have one song on here, Ride with the Devil, Run with the Devil? Race with the Devil. Race with the Devil, which actually Judas Priest covered, and it appears on one of the reissues of one of their albums as a bonus track. So that's cool. This is a very varied album. In a way, it reminds me of Cream Wheels of Fire, which also explored different styles. But I feel this one has a little bit more texture. I feel the Cream one, again, this is kind of more uniformity to the sound in spite of the stylistic changes. This one, I feel there's more distinction between each of the tracks. There's one long instrumental one, which has, again, got some, heavy fuzz tone guitar. But there are also some other, like, around 67, 68, you were getting these kind of really interesting British songs, like the first Pink Floyd album, where they have almost like, it seems like kids' story lyrics. Yeah, but anyway, and this also comes with a few bonus tracks as well. So I haven't listened to it for a long time, but I keep this one because, yeah, it's a pretty cool album, and it's probably one of those a little bit lower down behind, Pink Floyd and Cream and those guys. Okay, so this is Vanilla Fudge Renaissance, and I actually have this on vinyl, packed away in the closet here, along with Rock and Roll, the next album, the 1969 album by Vanilla Fudge. And I might actually like Rock and Roll just a bit more because of, I think, 3 or 4 particular songs, but I haven't got it on CD yet. It's gotta get it this year, I think. But anyway, I really liked this one here, and I think this album is a really good prototype for Deep Purple and Uriah Heep, say like 1970. The previous Vanilla Fudge album, in the first one, I feel there was just a lot more organ and these kind of like almost church-like vocals with the heavy guitar kind of a little bit more in the back. But here I feel the organ and the guitar are both equally in the front, sometimes more guitar, sometimes more organ. And some of the tracks on here have just got some really cool heavy guitar. What was it here? Thoughts and Paradise were 2 of my favorites, and Faceless People has just got some really awesome heavy riff to it, which is kind of like proto Black Sabbath type thing, and this is from 1968. This is also the one that has Season of the Witch, which is kind of a weird one, but I always kind of liked it anyway. It gives a bit of a chilling feeling, especially at the end where he says, "Mama, I'm so cold." Okay, and then the last of the albums to talk about, this is The Who Sell Out, which is, I had originally the CD, just the plain album CD, and then I got this like bonus thing here with, I don't know, was it 2 discs or was it 3? Probably 2 discs anyway. I always thought this album was so interesting. The original concept was that they would do an album where in between each of the tracks there'd be like a short kind of like commercial jingle or something. And, they've got one track here, Heinz Baked Beans, or Odorono, a kind of like deodorant. Medac, kind of pimple medicine. I think there's you can hardly see it there. But anyway, yeah, I really liked that. It was just like so British in a way to do an album of, 1967. It got some heavy tracks like I Can See for Miles, and Armenia? No, Armenia, as they say it, City in the Sky. Some heavy tracks like that, and of course they're more kind of more melodic type tracks, a little bit more like power pop type tracks, but in between all these like advertisements. But it only went on, I think, for the first side of the album. From the second side they started to cut that out, which was in a way kind of a shame. But Relax, I like that one. Silas Stingy was interesting. Sunrise, and then Real, which was kind of the continuing Pete Townshend's experiments with kind of more like epic type, rock opera type songs. And then this one here has like a bunch of bonus tracks on disc 1, and then disc 2 has the original mono album and then more bonus tracks. The Coke After Coke, Jaguar. Yeah, lots of different stuff here. Again, this advertising jingle type thing. Different versions of different songs here. And I think they also have In the Hall of the Mountain King. So the Coke After Coke and In the Hall of the Mountain King, it's also gets, the heavier guitar starts coming out anyway. So the original album, lots of great stuff on there, and then all these bonus tracks, just wonderful. Thanks for that. Okay, so that's it for the actual albums. Of course, there are lots more, but I think that's enough. Otherwise, the videos will get too long. But just to mention some of these compilations here, this is the Yardbirds, Over, Under, Sideways, Down, a comprehensive collection, 1963 to 1968, 28 tracks. Eric Clapton, Jeff Beck, Jimmy Page, with Jimmy Page here and Jeff Beck here. And yeah, 28 tracks, including Think About It, 10 Little Indians, Tinker Tailor, Soldier Sailor, Drinking Muddy Water Puzzles, Little Games, from the Little Games album, Stroll On, that really nice, heavy rewrite of Train Kept A-Rollin', The Nazar Blue with Jeff Beck actually singing, Happenings 10 Years Time Ago, one of my favorite Yardbird songs. You're a Better Man Than I, with that great heavy distorted guitar solo. I talked about this in my Jeff Beck video I did a little bit back. And of course other stuff too, with early stuff with Jeff Beck, and starting out with Eric Clapton here, finishing with Jimmy Page here. This is a really great compilation. It has probably most of the songs that I would reach for when I want to hear the Yardbirds, because I'm more interested in the Yardbirds when they were a little bit heavy, a little bit more guitar experimental, a little bit more on the edgy side, which Jeff Beck brought to the band. So yeah, very cool compilation, that one. Then this was a band I found out about called Q65. It's a Dutch band. A lot of this is like proto-punk stuff, and pretty heavy, some of it too. Like The Cry in the Night is just a really solid hard-rocking track circa 1966 anyway. And there are some, of course, lighter ones on here. There's a cover of Spoonful, it looks like. I haven't listened to that for a long time. But there are Summer Thoughts in a Field of Weed. Is it in a field of weed? I just noticed that. I thought it was wheat. But anyway, some of the tracks on here are pretty solid, hard-hitting tracks, and I think it's really cool. I always love to hear that kind of gritty, edgy garage rock from the mid-60s, and there's quite a bit of it on here. Plus, I think the singer had probably the longest hair of any guy in 1966, although the singer for the Pretty Things was probably pretty close. Alright, and here is a special one that I found, The Music Machine and the Bonniwell Music Machine. This is a compilation of just about everything that the Music Machine and Sean Bonniwell with the Bonniwell Music Machine did, including some Sean Bonniwell solo material, which is not all that fantastic. But what I love about the Music Machine, first of all, I heard the song Talk Talk, which is just one of my favorite garage rock 60s songs. It's like 1 minute and 56 seconds, but it has so many like change-ups in the music. It's as if punk went prog in 1 minute and 56 seconds almost. Apparently it's very hard to cover that song because the drumming is quite tricky in parts. So love that. And then I had another CD originally, and then I just got these instead because they were even better. But there's quite a bit of really cool, intelligent lyrics, psychedelic garage rock type songs, including some heavier stuff like The Eagle Never Hunts the Fly is just probably one of their heaviest songs originally done in late 66 and finally put on their second album in 67. And one thing that was cool about the Music Machine is that they all dressed in black, they all wore one black glove, and everybody had black hair. And then they down-tuned their instruments. I think it was a semitone, just to give it a little bit more of a darker feel to it. But yeah, I think they just have such a collection of interesting songs. Probably I could pick my favorites from these two and just make one really cool, solid, edgy type, sometimes heavy type album. They wrote lyrics about like kind of like women's liberation or food waste or environmental issues, as well as some of the more, you know, standard relationship type songs. So they were a bit ahead of their time in that way. And I think Sean Bonnewell just passed away, it was like 10 years ago or something. Look at this. Look at all these songs. Wow. So pretty much almost everything they ever recorded. Awesome. And this is really interesting. This is a band called The Misunderstood who came out of Riverside, California, really inspired by the Yardbirds. I mean, it was like they were the American Yardbirds, but of course totally inspired by the Yardbirds, not trying to be the Yardbirds. But they actually, John Peel caught one of their performances and was so impressed with them that he befriended the band, and then he really tried to encourage them to get their asses over to London. He said, you're going to have a lot more success if you go to London. And let me see, I'm going to reach and pull this book off the shelf. I have this, Like Misunderstood, written by Rick Brown and Mike Stax. And Rick Brown was the vocalist for the band. So, big thick thing telling all about what happened. But yeah, they went over to London and their guitarist decided that wasn't really going to be his scene. So he said, go on with my blessing, find yourself another guitarist, and best of luck to you guys. You deserve every success you can get. So they got Tony Hill, an English lead guitarist, as he stressed. And Tony Hill would later on form High Tide, which is a kind of heavy progressive band from the late 60s who did a couple of albums. Anyway, they cut 6 tracks in London, and those 6 tracks, this was late 66. They were being billed as the sound of 67. Probably it would be more like the sound of 69, I think. Like, there was still the Yardbirds feel, but there was also this more adventurous feeling to the music, and I just feel like it's almost like blues inspired, but getting into the psychedelic stuff and moving towards progressive, early progressive rock, all in 6 tracks. So this album here has 6 tracks that they cut in, I think it was 65, and then the 6 tracks that they recorded in London. What happened after that was Rick Brown got drafted, and they couldn't get him out of it in any way. The US military had more power than the lawyers for the record company who tried to keep him, and he had to go. And long story that. But an interesting thing, I received a question on Quora asking about how John Peel was instrumental in promoting punk and new wave bands of the late 70s. And so I commented that John Peel always had an open mind for new music. He was always looking for the creators of new trends before those trends became trendy. And I mentioned about, I think I mentioned that, and then somebody commented and said, and I can attest that he was the same even in the mid-60s. And so then I responded saying, hey, about The Misunderstood, and I gave a brief explanation. And the guy responded to me saying, I have sat at the same table as John Peel and The Misunderstood several times when I saw them after their performances. So this guy lived in Riverside, California in 65, 66, and he saw The Misunderstood performing and met them and met with John Peel. And he said after John Peel returned to London and, to promote the band or manage the band, whatever it was, I forget. But he said John Peel sent their first single to him, and he still has that single. And he just thought that this band is years ahead of their time. So this is just really cool. I love these 6 London tracks, and they're pretty good as a Yardbirds fan band too. So that's The Misunderstood. And that's just really coincidental that today it was that I had this exchange with this guy. So that's really neat. Okay, a couple more to mention. This is the Action, Rolled Gold. Now the Action were kind of, I think, your typical 66, 67 British pop rock band, similar to lots of other ones. But this compilation is a bunch of songs from their final recordings, which actually never got out onto an album, I think, because they broke up then. This is really incredible because listening to this, you could say that it's almost like a prototype for Oasis or 90s Britpop. It's almost like they started to invent a new sound and then canned it, and then that new sound got picked up 25 years later by new British artists. It is really cool. I'm really impressed with this. Oh gosh, I don't remember what all the songs are now, but anyway, Come Around, Something to Say. Oh geez, some of them are more like that than others, but this is just such an interesting album because of all the British stuff from the 60s I have. Nobody was doing what these guys were doing exactly. Like, just that's my impression. Maybe I'm wrong. But anyway, out of everybody I've heard, even like other bands like The Attack or The Creation, these guys were inventing 90s Britpop in 1968. Pretty cool. Okay, and the last one, I've talked about this before. This is Stone Garden. This is a band out of Idaho who were basically part of the Pacific Northwest heavy psychedelic scene of the late 60s. Really awesome heavy stuff. Not right off the bat, but getting to the late 60s there, really good distorted heavy guitar and just some really great songs on here. The one that everybody knows, if I can find it now, Oceans Inside Me. And there's two different versions on here. And then there's songs like Bastard and Stop My Thinking, Assembly Line. I just love that one. Just some really good heavy stuff. And they ran basically from the mid-60s through to the early 70s. The guitarist Paul Spear, later on he learned about production. And later on he teamed up with David Lance, New Age pianist, and they made some New Age albums together. I actually talked about Paul Spear, I think it was in episode 8. I've mentioned some of his albums since then because he's continued to put out these kind of New Age music, but sometimes the guitar is a little bit on the rock edge. And he actually did an album or two together with Scott Rockenfeld of Queensryche. So that's pretty cool. So anyway, this is some really cool, heavy stuff on here. Not all the songs, but a lot of them are. And that's it. That's all I'm going to talk about today. Otherwise, the video is going to get way too long. But there are lots of other cool albums from the 60s perched behind me. I've got boxes down here with proto metal, which is, basically heavy stuff from 69, 70, 71. But anyway, that's good enough. So let's hang it up there, and I'll catch you in the next video. Thanks everyone for watching. Hey, if you've got some really cool albums you want to suggest that I check out, or you just want to tell me about some cool albums you like, go ahead and leave comments. You're free to do so. Thanks. See you the next time, folks. Bye. And now I get to put everything into this box.